The night they vanished, the stars over Colony. 12 were calm that night. The wind was soft. Families sat inside their homes, sharing food and laughter. Children played under the night lamps, their shadows dancing on the dusty ground. The colony was far from Earth, quiet, peaceful. No one expected anything strange. But then, just after midnight, the sky turned red. People looked up. At first they thought it was a meteor, but it was too slow. Then came the sound, deep and low, like a beast breathing. Someone screamed. A black ship, smooth and long like a serpent, dropped down from the sky. It made no noise as it landed. Doors opened, shadows poured out, tall figures with glowing eyes and skin like steel. They were the Zarn, a species known only through rumors. No one had seen them this close before. They moved fast. They didn't speak. They didn't explain. They went from house to house, dragging women and girls out. They used strange tools that made people freeze, unable to move. Men tried to fight. They used old rifles, knives, even their fists. But nothing worked. The Zarn didn't kill the men. They just ignored them like they didn't matter. In less than 10 minutes, 27 women were taken. The ship rose without a sound. The red light vanished, and the colony was silent again. Hours later, an Earth Scout drone flew over the site. It recorded everything: the broken homes, the burn marks, the empty streets. The footage went viral. News anchors cried on camera. Leaders gave speeches full of anger. But behind closed doors, they argued. "We can't go to war," one general said. "We don't even know where the Zarn come from," said a diplomat. "They're too strong," said another. No one gave orders to chase the ship, but one man was watching. His name was Reed. He lived alone in a cabin far north of the main cities. He was old, with gray hair and scars on his hands. No one talked about him much. They said he used to be a soldier, but the kind the government tried to forget. He saw the footage. He paused, the screen on one image, a small handprint in the dirt. Beside it, a teddy bear soaked in blood. He stared at it for a long time. Then slowly, he stood up. He went to the back of his cabin. There was a hidden door under the floorboards. Inside was a metal crate sealed and dusty. He opened it. Inside were weapons no one was supposed to have. Human-made, illegal, deadly. He picked up a blade with his name carved on the handle. "They made a mistake," he whispered. He sat down and typed a message into a cracked old tablet. "To all who remember what we were subject, they took our women location. Colony 12, I'm going in. Who's with me?" He hit send. Minutes later, replies started coming. "Been waiting for something like this. Tell me where and when. I still have my gear. I never buried it." Across the solar system, forgotten names lit up again. Soldiers who had been discharged. Fighters who had been left behind. They were old, broken, or lost. But now, they had a reason to return. The next morning, Reed looked out his window. The sun was rising, but the light felt cold. He packed a bag, took his weapons, and left the cabin without locking the door. He didn't plan to return. He had one goal now: bring them back, or burn the galaxy trying. Assembling the forgotten, the galaxy had forgotten them. Men once called heroes, now buried in silence. Men who had fought in the dark corners of alien wars, who had survived things that would shatter the minds of lesser species. But when peace came, they were thrown away. Too dangerous, too broken, too human. But Reed remembered. His message had reached those ghosts. The first to arrive was Jax, once a demolitions expert feared across 3 sectors. Now he walked with a limp and lived in a mining dome on a frozen moon. He didn't speak much when he stepped off the ship. He just nodded, dropped his pack, and said, "Tell me where they are." Next came Amari, a sniper who used to take shots from orbit. Her eyes had been replaced by something alien. She could see heat, emotion, and lies. She said she was done with war. But when she saw the footage of the captured women, she packed up her rifle and didn't look back. Then came Koba, a beast of a man who once fought with bare hands against armored brutes. He had lived in a prison colony for killing a Zarn noble during a riot. The guards tried to stop him from leaving. They failed. Reed watched them arrive one by one, quiet, grim, and ready. They met in a deep space hangar, hidden from satellites and patrols. The place was dark, full of rusted tools and half-broken ships. It smelled of oil, sweat, and old memories. Reed stood in front of them, his hands behind his back. "I won't lie to you," he said. "This is a death mission. We don't know where they are. We don't know how many we'll face, but we know what they did and we know who they took." Jax grunted. "Don't care if we live. Just care that they bleed." Reed nodded. "Then welcome back." They called themselves the Wrathborn. Each member brought something different. A hacker who once rewrote a station's AI during a siege. A pilot who could fly through asteroid fields blind. A medic who had patched soldiers with half their bodies gone. They were not a team. They were a storm waiting to break. Reed stood over a dusty table, spreading out maps, data, and old war reports. "The Zarn don't trade openly," he said. "But there's a black market route near the spiral edge. Rumors say that's where the flesh ships go, ships that carry slaves." "Disgusting," Amari whispered. "They don't see us as people," Reed replied. "They think we're weak. They think humans are soft." He tapped the map. "We're going to show them we're not." They needed a ship, fast, quiet, armed. But they had no government help. No fleet. No official support. What they had was old contacts and old debts. They went to Varka, a junkyard, moon ruled by criminals. The owner was a 10-eyed creature called Skeel who once owed Reed his life. Skeel laughed when he saw them. "You humans never quit, do you?" "Only when we're dead," Reed said. He showed them a stealth ship buried under garbage. It was patched, ugly, and illegal. It had no name. Reed stared at it. "We'll call it Revenant." They worked on the ship for 6 days, fixed the engines, tuned the weapons, loaded supplies. Reed stood in silence one night staring at the stars above the hangar. Jax came beside him. "You really think we can bring them back?" Reed didn't look at him. "I don't know." "Then why do this?" "Because they're ours," Reed said, "and you don't take what's ours." When they were ready, the Wrathborn boarded the Revenant. They wore black armor, no emblems, no flags, only old scars and hard eyes. As the engines roared to life, Reed sent one final message to Earth. "Don't follow. Don't stop us. This isn't a rescue. This is punishment." And with that, they vanished into the dark, chasing ghosts and monsters. And somewhere far across the stars, the Zarn would soon remember why deathworlders were feared. Inside the alien cages, the slave market floated in the void like a wound that never healed. It was not a planet, not a station. It was a massive ancient relic, hollowed out by time and greed. It spun slowly, surrounded by armed ships and old bones of those who had tried to escape. They called it Barta's Cradle, though no child had ever been born there. Only pain. Nina sat inside a narrow cage made of living metal. It pulsed softly under her, like the rib cage of some alien beast. She could not stretch her legs. She could barely sit up. Her lips were dry, her face bruised, and her hands shackled with a strange blue gel that burned when touched. It had been 12 days since she was taken. She had stopped crying after the 3rd, but she had not stopped watching. Every day the Zarn guards came through the cages. They picked women one by one, some for labor, some for shows, some for the bidding halls. Nina saw her friend Risa dragged away 2 nights ago. She never came back. Nina knew what happened behind the black doors. The Zarn called it conditioning, but she would not break. Her father had taught her how to hunt in the forests of Colony. 12. He said humans were not strong because of muscles or weapons. They were strong because they could outlast anything. Even pain, he had told her once, handing her a blood-stained knife. Even fear. So when the guards passed her cage, Nina stared at them with sharp eyes, full of hate. It unsettled them. "This one," said one Zarn handler, clicking his tongue. "She's got fire." His companion laughed. "We'll fix that." But they never reached her. An alarm echoed through the halls. Then silence. Nina tilted her head. A moment later, the walls shook. Then came the screams. Outside the cage chambers, smoke poured through the vents. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. Distant sounds of gunfire echoed through the halls, but it didn't sound like energy blasts. It was raw, thunderous, human. Nina's heart pounded. Hope was a dangerous thing in places like this. It could get you killed faster than despair. But still, she listened. There were voices in the chaos, low, calm, brutal. "Room clear, 2 Zarn down, cover left, find the cages." Nina pressed her face against the bars. A moment later, something exploded down the hall. Part of the floor gave way. Black-armored figures dropped through, landing like shadows with teeth. They moved fast, with perfect control. Their helmets glowed red. One of them pointed at her cage. "That one. She's human." "What gave it away?" Another joked, pulling a tool from his belt. Nina didn't laugh. She just stared. One of the soldiers removed his helmet. He was older than she, expected, gray-bearded, hard-eyed, but there was something behind his face, pain and purpose. "Can you walk?" he asked. Nina nodded. The soldier sliced the gel cuffs. They burned away in blue fire. She collapsed into his arms for a moment, dizzy. He didn't flinch. Others worked down the hall, cutting open more cages, freeing more women. "Who are you?" Nina asked. "We're the Wrathborn," the man said. "Are you soldiers?" He shook his head. "We're what happens when the galaxy forgets that humans don't run." Just as he helped her stand, a roar filled the chamber. A Zarn brute nearly 9 feet tall smashed through the far wall. Its armor was thick and covered in runes. In its hand was a massive blade made from bone. "One of the generals," Reed muttered. He handed Nina a knife. "Stay behind me." The brute charged. Reed met him head on. They clashed with terrifying speed, steel and bone, fists and fury. Reed moved like a beast, his body flowing around the blows, striking with deadly purpose. The brute was stronger, but Reed was faster, and far more angry. In the end, it was Nina who made the kill. As the brute lifted Reed into the air, ready to snap his spine, Nina drove the knife deep into its side. It howled. Reed dropped and rolled, drawing a hidden blade from his boot and slammed it upward into the creature's throat. It fell hard. Nina stared at the blood on her hands. "Good," Reed said, panting. "You're one of us now." The women were gathered, quickly, moved through smoke-filled tunnels. Reed called for evac, and the stealth ship Revenant began its approach. The Wrathborn left behind flames, corpses, and a simple message carved into the wall of the slave market. "You took from Earth, now we take back," as they flew away. Nina looked out the window. She wasn't free yet. But for the first time in days, she smiled. Humans had come, and they were worse than monsters. First Blood space was quiet again, but not for long. Word of the attack spread fast. The slave market known as Barta's Cradle was gone, burned from the inside. More than 60 captives freed. Over 100 Zarn dead, including one of their generals. No one believed the first reports. Humans? Impossible. But the footage didn't lie. Security feeds showed figures in black armor moving like ghosts, killing like predators. No official military tags. No known symbols. Only one phrase scrawled into a wall with alien blood. "Return what you took." The Galactic media tried to cover it quietly. They called it a terrorist event, a breakout riot, maybe a mutiny by rogue species. But survivors knew the truth. They whispered a word that made old generals nervous. Deathworlders. Meanwhile, far from the Empire's heart, the Revenant floated in the shadow of a dead moon. Inside, the air was tense, not from fear, but purpose. The Wrathborn were not celebrating. They were preparing. Nina sat in the med bay, her hands freshly wrapped, a scar now crossing her cheek. She had refused sleep, refused rest. She was reading everything Reed had. Maps, rumors, old contacts. You don't need to do this, Reed told her. We'll get you back to Earth. She looked at him, eyes like cold fire. They took my sister. I saw her in the holding pens. She's still out there. Reed didn't argue. In the ship's war room, the team studied their next target. Fortress Zarkesh. Not a market, a processing site, a place where captives were retrained, conditioned, and prepared for transport to buyers across the galaxy. It was also heavily armed, surrounded by patrols, and protected by something worse than soldiers, ancient war machines built by the Zarni. Long before humans ever left Earth. We hit it, Reed said, pointing at the diagram, not to win, but to send a message. They need to understand, we're not done. We won't make it out, Amari warned. Maybe not, he replied, but someone will. They forged a plan in the dark. Not a siege, not a rescue, a strike. Jax planted explosives on a cargo vessel weeks before. They would crash it into Zarkesh's outer walls. In the chaos, the Wrathborn would drop in from orbit, invisible to sensors, fast and brutal. And so it began. The cargo ship, painted to look like a merchant vessel, flew toward the fortress at full speed. Zarn scanners didn't even blink until it exploded. The outer wall tore open. Fire and metal rained down. Alarms screamed. Seconds later, the Wrathborn dropped through the sky like black comets. Reed hit the ground first, his boots cracking stone. Behind him, Jax rolled out with his cannon, already blowing through enemy mechs. Amari vanished into the shadows, her rifle picking off targets one by one with inhuman calm. The Zarn were slow to react. They were not used to humans bringing war. Nina followed behind, her heart a drum in her chest. The training Reed gave her in those quiet hours aboard the ship now flowed like instinct. She ducked, moved, stabbed, shot. This wasn't a girl anymore. This was a flame that refused to go out. Inside the prison blocks, they found the captives, hooked to machines, strapped to slabs, eyes blank with drugs. Some could still be saved. Others had been broken too far. One woman begged them not to free her. "They'll just take me again," she whispered. Reed looked at her with soft, old eyes. "No," he said, "and they won't." He gave her a choice, a gun and a direction. She chose both. The Wrathborn set charges on the main reactor. They weren't here to hold ground. They were here to erase it. And then came the Warden, taller than any Zarn they had seen. Armor fused with machines. A voice like static and thunder. It walked through fire like a god, its fists glowing with energy, its eyes locked on Reed. "You will not leave," it growled. "I didn't plan to," Reed answered. Their battle was not graceful. It was savage. The Warden's blows shattered walls. Reed dodged and bled and struck back. But he was only human, and that was enough. With help from Jax's last grenade, a wall fell onto the Warden. Nina drove a metal pipe through its eye as it roared. Reed didn't speak. He simply pulled the trigger and ended it. They left nothing behind. Zarkesh burned. And as the Revenant escaped into the stars once more, the Wrathborn didn't cheer. They watched, silent. But the galaxy did not stay silent. The Zarn screamed, for vengeance. War councils gathered. Bounties were placed on all human heads. Other species, some enslaved for centuries, began to whisper. Humans are fighting back. And deep in the dark, the Wrathborn sharpened their blades again. They weren't finished. They were just getting started. The Wrathborn warpath, the galaxy trembled, but still pretended not to. In high towers and polished halls, alien leaders called for calm. They told the people the humans are only a small group, that they will burn out soon. But in the shadows, they were scared, because the Wrathborn didn't move like rebels. They moved like ghosts of a dead army, one the galaxy thought it had buried, and they kept coming, planet by planet, fortress by fortress. The Wrathborn hit targets no one dared to touch. They moved through asteroid belts, ion storms, even black zones patrolled by automated sentinels. They never stayed long. They never explained. They came with fire, freed the captives, and vanished again. The galaxy began to call them something new. The Stormwalkers. On board the Revenant, Reed stood over a dark metal table watching holograms flicker. Red zones marked targets. Blue dots marked survivors. But in between, too many faces were grayed out. Men and women they couldn't reach in time. He felt their loss like knives in the ribs. Nina walked in, now wearing light armor, stained and scorched. She moved differently now, quieter, stronger. But something inside her was changing too. "We found the next one," she said. "Sector Vren 6. It's not a prison, it's a breeding center." Reed looked up sharply. Zarn? And their buyers. The room grew cold. Jack slammed a metal cup onto the table. "Then we burn it to the ground." The next few days were chaos. The Wrathborn intercepted a convoy carrying new slaves, girls no older than 16, chained to seats, pumped with drugs to keep them calm. The team hit the ship so fast the crew didn't even fire a shot. Reed dragged the captain out of the pilot seat and asked him one question. "Who paid for them?" The captain spat in his face. Jax broke both his arms. He talked after that. What they learned chilled them. A whole network, one that reached deep into galactic trade routes, protected by corrupt governors, smugglers, and worse. The Zarn were not alone. They had partners, allies, customers. "It's not just war anymore," Amari said quietly, cleaning her rifle. "It's a sickness." "Then we become the cure," Reed replied. They didn't have an army. They didn't have ships like the Empire. But they had something more dangerous. Nothing left to lose. Across the stars, the Wrathborn became a myth. Aliens told stories to their children. If you hurt a human, they will come for you. They don't care about rules or mercy. They are fire and flesh. But the more they struck, the more enemies rose to stop them. Soon they weren't just facing Zarn troops. They were hunted by private militias, bounty guilds, even battle fleets from allied empires. The galaxy had decided. Humans had become a problem. They laid ambushes, traps. They sent assassins. They even hacked into the Revenant once, almost venting its airlocks. They failed. But the cost was high. In one mission near the dust moons of Kivar, Reed lost 3 of his people. Garen, the hacker, Marta, the combat medic, and Lynn, the quiet scout who barely spoke but always smiled at Nina. They didn't die like heroes. They died screaming alone, trying to give the others time to escape. Nina sat in the cargo bay that night, holding Lynn's broken goggles in her hand. Reed found her there staring into nothing. "They're going to kill us all," she whispered. "Probably," Reed said. "Then why keep going?" He looked at her, tired eyes full of memories. "Because they haven't paid enough yet." The Revenant limped through the dark after that. Engines patched, hull scorched, ammo low, but the fire in their hearts only grew hotter, because somewhere, on the edge of the spiral arm, there was one last location, a fortress not listed on any map, not spoken of by any free species. The Cradle of Chains. Rumors said this was where the first human women were taken, where the Zarn started their experiments, where entire bloodlines were twisted into currency. Nina's sister was there, and maybe, just maybe, so was the truth about why the Zarn chose humans. "It ends there," Reed said. "One way or another." He tapped the old metal table, the same one they had planned every attack on. "We've been fighting shadows. It's time to strike the heart." And as the Wrathborn prepared for their last and most dangerous mission, a message spread across the deep channels of the galaxy, passed from slave to slave, from rebel to rebel, whispered even by dying mouths. The humans are coming, and they are bringing hell with them. Breaking the unbreakable space around the Cradle of Chains was dead. No light, no sound, no movement. It sat beyond mapped sectors, past the edges of known trade, hidden inside a dying nebula. The gas clouds around it twisted like smoke over a battlefield. Even automated probes turned back. their systems crashing without warning. But the Revenant went forward. They had spent weeks gathering whispers, scraps of coordinates, and tortured confessions from Zarn prisoners. And now, at last, the nightmare had a name, a shape, a place. The Cradle of Chains wasn't a building. It was a living moon, grown and twisted by ancient biotech, shaped to feed off pain. Its surface pulsed with red veins of energy, and its towers curved like claws reaching into the void. No doors, no ports, no landing zone, only one entrance, and it wasn't meant for ships. "It's a siphon gate," Jax growled, staring at the scans. "You don't fly into it. You get pulled." "Like prey," Amari added. Reed said nothing. He stood at the front of the bridge, hands clasped behind his back, jaw tight. Nina stood beside him, armor darker than the void, a blade strapped. "Across her back, we go in quiet," he said. "We free whoever's still alive. And we burn this place from its cursed core." "How?" someone asked. "We don't even know what's waiting inside." Reed turned. "Then we adapt, like humans do." They flew in under cloak. The siphon, gate opening like a maw. The Revenant groaned as it passed through, metal creaking, lights flickering. The inside of the cradle was massive, far bigger than it looked from the outside. It was not just a prison. It was a lab, a shrine, a market, and a graveyard all fused into one. Bodies floated in liquid tubes, some alive, some changed, some too far gone to recognize. Human voices echoed faintly through speakers, speaking in broken tones. Pleas, prayers, screams on a loop. They landed in silence, deep in the structure's lower veins. The walls pulsed around them like muscle. Warm. Wet. "Stay sharp," Reed said. "This thing is alive, and it knows we're here." They moved fast, through hallways shaped like throats, across bridges made of bone, past watchtowers filled with half-living guards wired into the walls, and then they found them, the captives. Dozens of women suspended in biopods, minds sedated, bodies studied like machines. Zarn scientists moved between them, silent and precise. They didn't react to the Wrathborn until Reed shot the first one through the chest. Then everything turned to chaos. Alarms howled. The cradle shifted around them. Walls closed. Creatures poured from vents. Zarn elite, stronger and faster than anything they'd fought before. But the Wrathborn were ready. Jax laid charges across the power conduits. Amari covered the team, dropping enemies with perfect shots even while moving. Reed led the charge through the core halls, cutting down anything that stood between them and the prisoners. Nina found her sister in the back chamber, floating in a stasis tank. Her hair was longer, her body thinner. But her face... "Sora," Nina whispered, voice cracking. She smashed the tank, caught her sister as she fell. Sora's eyes fluttered open. "I knew. You'd come," she breathed. Nina held her close. "I'm never leaving you again." But they were out of time. The heart of the cradle woke up. It wasn't just a structure, it was a creature, a massive being, fused into the walls, its mind spread across the moon's systems. It spoke in every voice the Wrathborn had ever heard. Friends, enemies, lost comrades, twisting memory into confusion. Reed stepped forward. "You know what humans do to monsters?" he said. "We put them down." He and Nina worked together to overload the core. They rerouted the energy through the siphon gate, turning the cradle's own power against itself. It began to tear apart, veins snapping, walls cracking, fire bursting from the ground. "We need to go, now," Amari shouted. The team ran with what they had, survivors slung over shoulders, wounded helped along. They reached the Revenant, with seconds to spare. As the ship shot out of the cradle, the entire moon twisted in on itself and exploded, scattering glowing ash into the void. Silence returned. Inside the ship, Sora slept in Nina's arms. Jax slumped in a seat, covered in blood that wasn't his. Amari wiped a tear from her cheek. And Reed sat quietly, staring out the viewport, his reflection lined with scars and smoke. They had done it. They had broken the unbreakable. But they had not won peace. The galaxy had seen the Wrathborn's true face now, and the galaxy would never forget. The galaxy remembers. The cradle of chains was gone. Its ashes floated across the void like dead stars carried by the breath of vengeance. There was no trace left, no signal, no bodies, no walls, only silence, only smoke, only fear. For the first time in over a century, the Zarn Empire lost more than a battle. They lost their grip. Governors whispered behind locked doors. Nobles demanded answers. Generals demanded blood. But none of them had a target. The Wrathborn left no flag, no trace, no face to strike back at. And that was what terrified them most. What do you do when your enemy wears no uniform? What do you do when your prey refuses to fear you? Across the galaxy, slave markets began to shut down. Buyers fled, guards deserted, chains rusted in empty halls. Even the bravest of the Zarn elite looked over their shoulders now, fearing the black armor and red eyes of Reed's crew. Rumors flew faster than ships. They come without warning. They do not speak. They do not take prisoners. On dozens of worlds, captives who had lost all hope suddenly found themselves free. No one knew how. Doors opened in the night. Guards lay dead in pools of blood. And always, always, a message left behind. Never again. The Revenant drifted silently above a quiet moon, hidden behind a gas giant. Inside, it was still and dim. No war cries now. No guns firing. Just the deep breathing of the wounded, the hum of the engines, and the weight of what they had done. Nina sat at her sister's side, wiping her forehead gently with a wet cloth. Sora was healing, but slowly. Her mind was fractured, her voice soft. But her eyes, those were sharp again. She had seen hell, and now she watched the galaxy burn it down, piece by piece. "You found me," Sora whispered. "I never stopped looking," Nina replied, holding her hand tightly. Reed stood alone in the observation deck, his armor stripped off, his hands resting on the glass. The stars shimmered in front of him, cold and distant. He had lost count of the enemies killed. The fires lit, the systems shaken, but none of it brought him peace. Jax joined him, arms folded. "We did it." Reed didn't look at him. "No, we made them bleed. That's not the same." "You regret it?" "I regret it wasn't sooner." Jax grinned. "You think they'll come after us now?" Reed finally turned. "They already are." He was right. The Zarn sent war fleets, but they were too slow. The Wrathborn had already moved. Other species, once allies of the Zarn, now hesitated. They began to question, began to wonder. They had seen the recordings, heard the stories. Humans who fought with fire in their blood and revenge in their bones, not for money, not for glory, but for justice. Raw, pure, final. On a neutral broadcast station, a young alien reporter delivered the news. The Wrathborn are not just soldiers, they are a reckoning. And she was right. Because now, across planets once painted in silence, children were naming their pets Reed. Teenagers were carving the word Wrathborn into their boots. Slaves in hiding began organizing underground, calling themselves Stormwalkers. And humans? Humans remembered what they were. They weren't just survivors anymore. They were a force the galaxy couldn't tame. Nina stood at the top deck of the ship, looking out at the stars, her sister asleep behind her, her hands resting on the railing. "They'll come," she said quietly. Amari, behind her, nodded. "They always do." "Good," Nina whispered, because she was no longer the girl in the cage. She was the one who broke it. And as the Revenant disappeared into the dark once again, the galaxy learned a final truth. One passed in hushed voices from ship to ship, station to station, species to species. You can steal from humans. You can hurt them. You can even kill them. But if you ever touch what they love, you become the monster in their story, and they will be your end.